What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Front Yard Fantasy Mock Draft Review. Today, we are going to be reviewing the mock draft that we did on Monday, May 30th. This was a Superflex Redraft mock draft, and one of the first Superflex Redraft mocks we did after the NFL draft, since rookies were going to be included. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up this draft board. There's a couple of teams, 3 to be exact, that I want to talk about that I either really liked or I thought they had interesting draft construction, roster construction. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up, and then let's start talking about those teams. The very first team that I wanted to talk about was drafting over here out of the 8 spot. That is Crawdads 87. Now, for those of you that do not know, this is a Superflex league, and what Superflex means is that you can start multiple quarterbacks. On top of your traditional flex spot, which is running back, wide receiver, tight end, there's going to be an additional flex spot where you can start a running back, wide receiver, tight end, or quarterback. So what this generally means is that on any given week, you're going to want to start 2 quarterbacks. You don't have to, but quarterbacks generally score the most points. So with that being said, Crawdads 87's team, drafting from the 8 spot, had a couple of things that I really liked about it. I like the way they constructed this. First, I felt like they got pretty good value, maybe the wrong word, but they got great running backs, and they didn't have to take one in the first round. Joe Mixon was the number 3 scoring running back in PPR last year, 3rd in total touches, 3rd in goal line carries, and tied Jonathan Taylor and James Conner for the most red zone touchdowns. I know he was drafted here as the 3rd running back off the board, but it was close to the middle of the 2nd round, and I like that pick. There's no reason to believe that Joe Mixon can't do that again this year, and with an improved offensive line on that Bengals team, it could be an even better year for him. I expect this offense to keep on humming. But the one that is a real value, I feel like, is Aaron Jones down here at the back end of the 3rd round, middle back end of the 3rd round. Aaron Jones very well could be the leading receiver for the Packers next season. They lost Davante Adams, and we know that Aaron Rodgers likes to throw the ball to a player that he trusts. Well, who does he trust on that team? He trusts Allen Lazard, but I don't see his volume going up too much. And he trusts Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones' receiving work is in line to go up dramatically. Now, he may lose touches to A.J. Dillon, which is why I think his value is falling in these drafts. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. That could clear up more space for him or more freedom for the team to use him in a receiving role. And a reception is worth almost double what a touch is in fantasy football. You want your running backs to be ones that are pass catchers. So I love this Aaron Jones pick. Now, the part that makes this roster come together, though, is didn't draft a wide receiver until the 4th round. But the wide receiver core came together so beautifully. I'm a big fan of the wide receivers. John Luke always used to say that value is where talent meets uncertainty, and I don't think that can be illustrated much better than what we're seeing right here. A.J. Brown on a new team, a run-heavy team. There's some uncertainty there, but Devonta Smith put up pretty good numbers last year, and I don't think Devonta Smith is the receiver that A.J. Brown is. So I'm excited to see A.J. Brown in this offense, and that uncertainty is allowing you to get him a little bit later. Deontay Johnson, there's a new quarterback in town, but Big Ben was throwing to him with that noodle arm. Now, the name of the game for Deontay Johnson is volume. He needs that volume to stay successful, but hopefully with the new quarterback there, it's going to keep coming. And then Jerry Judy has a new quarterback himself in Russell Wilson. It's less question marks about the quality of the quarterback. We know Russ is good, and more about which is going to be his preferred target. Jerry Judy, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick. We don't know right now, but that uncertainty allows you to draft a guy like Judy down here. Not as much of a value as the other two, but I still love the pick, the mob rule. The one thing about your team that I don't love is the Mac Jones pick down there in the, the 10th round, 9th round for Mac Jones. That's fine value on him. But with your team, I would have really preferred you take one of the higher upside guys that were still available. Mac Jones is safe. I would have preferred Zach Wilson, Jameis Winston, one of these guys that maybe the floor is lower, but that ceiling is so much higher too. Now, what that really comes down to is personal preference and building a roster. I want that ceiling play whenever I'm drafting a quarterback late, but I understand going for the safer option in Mac Jones. So while I would personally prefer Zach Wilson or Jameis Winston, no shame in going the safer route right there. The next team I did want to talk about today was the Mob Rule. The Mob Rule drafting from that 11 spot over there. And oh boy, do I just get so excited when I see multiple receivers go off right away. And it is hard to have a better receiver start than the Mob Rule did with Jamar Chase, followed by Davante Adams. In fact, the only team I'd say is close is my team right before with Justin Jefferson and Stephon Diggs. those duos are probably fairly even. It comes down to whether you prefer Diggs or Adams, most likely, as Jefferson and Chase, I think, are in a tier of their own. But outside of those two receivers, what the mob rule did here was show that you don't have to draft a running back in the first 2 rounds to get super talented running backs. He drafted Saquon, Barclay, and Leonard Fournette as the 14th and 15th running backs off the board here. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with the talent of these two players or with the output that Leonard Fournette had last year. Now, Barkley's falling because of the obvious risk, right? There's injury concerns. He's been injured. He hasn't looked like the same player that we're used to his rookie season. But if he gets that volume and he's 75% of the player he used to be, he's going to be a value here at RB14. Outside of that, the one thing that I do love about the Mob Rules team is these high upside QBs. Trey Lance and Jameis Winston, serious question marks with these guys. Trey Lance played in a very limited capacity last year, was behind Jimmy Garoppolo, and we still don't know for certain that he's going to be the starter, but it is seeming more and more likely by the day. And with that rushing upside that he has, what he can do in fantasy terms is through the roof. We've seen Jalen Hurts. Look at him being drafted up here as the 5th quarterback off the board, and nobody's arguing that he's the world's best quarterback, but he's got that rushing floor and he's a decent enough passer, and that's all you got to do for fantasy. So Trey Lance can be another cheat code right there. And then Jameis Winston, when he was in Tampa, he was phenomenal for fantasy. Yeah, he was throwing interceptions every other play, but he was also just chucking the ball around, which is what you want from your quarterback. Now, in the limited time we saw him in New Orleans, he wasn't looking like that same guy. LASIK Jameis maybe is a whole new man. Maybe he's upgraded, but I love the upside that Jameis Winston represents in this New Orleans offense. The last team I wanted to talk about was Swamp Nola's team. Swampy over here drafting out of the 1-1. And for those of you that have watched my mock draft reviews or know my tendencies in fantasy football, this is not the typical team that I like. It is very heavy running back in the beginning. 4 running backs to start the draft. But the reason I wanted to highlight this is because while I may prefer some 0 RB teams, that doesn't mean I'm locked into that strategy. I'm looking at what's coming my way, and Swamp did exactly that here. It made sense. When Nick Chubb fell to him, he had to take him. James Conner's still sitting right there, coming off of his 15-touchdown season, and then Josh Jacobs in the 4th. Those were values at those picks. He had to take them, and the team that he constructed afterwards is pretty phenomenal. Not taking a receiver till the 5th round worked out for him as well. DK Metcalf, Brandon Cooks, Drake London as the starting receivers. Brandon Cooks is a steal every single year except 2019. But every year he is undervalued, and he's going to make somebody who drafts him very happy. Only once since entering the league in 2014 has he not been a top 24 wide receiver, and that is the aforementioned 2019 year. And this includes multiple top 12 finishes. So you're drafting Brandon Cooks pretty much at his floor, him being the 25th wide receiver taken off the board here. And he has wide receiver 1, that is a top 12 wide receiver, not the number 1 overall wide receiver. Upside, being the only show in town there in Houston. The ball's got to go to him. The other 2 wide receivers here, DK Metcalf, wildly talented, question marks at quarterback, right? We're waiting to see what that's going to look like. I know people were disappointed with the season last year, but he still had 12 touchdowns. He still showed us he's the same receiver that people fell in love with. And then Drake London's a rookie with all of the opportunity in the world. But again, he waited. There's going to be question marks about some of these guys, DK Metcalf, Drake London, but the upside that they have and a relative floor makes those wide receivers very exciting. Now, Swamp, I do think your quarterbacks are a little bit uninspiring. That doesn't mean bad. But for waiting so long, I think they're fine. Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz, nobody's excited about them being the QB 1 and 2 on their team. But you are so strong at running back and have strong enough receivers that I think you are going to be totally fine with these guys as your quarterbacks. They're going to be able to carry you, support you, or they're going to be able to support you while the rest of your team carries you to a very successful fantasy season. Guys, that is the last team I wanted to talk about today. I thought there were some fun ones here. I wanted to talk about a couple different roster constructions, and I think this draft does a good job of highlighting that you can build a successful team with multiple different draft strategies. We will be back with another mock draft review for the mock draft that took place this previous Monday, June 6th. Until then, though, we are out of here. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. And a reminder, to watch us on the Fantasy Football Game Show Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time if you enjoy this or if you enjoy playing games related to fantasy football. Until then, I'm out of here. Adios, everybody.